Hello, my name is Sophia Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. Today I'm going to tell you about the night my husband and my own stepsister tried to kill me on a yacht in the middle of the Atlantic. It all started when Emma leaned in close and whispered, "Say goodbye forever, sis," before shoving me overboard, while Marcus, the man I thought I loved, just stood there smiling. They believed I'd drown. They never expected what happened next. Before I tell you how I survived, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. Growing up in Boston, I was 16 when my dad married Linda, a divorced marketing executive with a daughter 2 years younger than me. Emma was everything I wasn't: blonde, bubbly, and blessed with the kind of natural charm that made everyone fall in love with her instantly. While I spent my weekends studying for advanced placement classes and volunteering at Mass General Hospital, Emma was winning homecoming queen and collecting admirers like baseball cards. Don't get me wrong, Linda tried to be a good stepmother, but there was always this unspoken understanding that Emma was the golden child. When Emma wanted a brand new BMW for her 18th birthday, somehow the family budget stretched to make it happen. When I needed help paying for medical school applications, I was handed a stack of scholarship forms and told to figure it out myself. "Sophia's so responsible," Linda would say, with that proud but distant tone. "She doesn't need as much guidance as Emma does." What she really meant was that Emma's tears got results, while my achievements got polite nods. I discovered my calling during a high school field trip to Boston Children's Hospital. Watching a pediatric cardiac surgeon save a 7-year-old's life, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with mine. Medicine wasn't just about helping people. It was about using precision, intelligence, and steady hands to literally hold life and death in your palms. Getting into Harvard Medical School meant working 3 jobs during undergrad: morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon tutoring sessions, and weekend lab assistant work. Meanwhile, Emma coasted through her communications degree at a state school, funded entirely by Dad and Linda's savings account. Every few months, she'd call me crying about some drama with her sorority or a boyfriend, and despite everything, I'd always wire her money for rent or car repairs when she asked. "You're my safety net, Soph," she'd say, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Medical school was brutal. 18-hour days, constant pressure, and the crushing weight of knowing that one mistake could cost someone their life. During my surgical residency, I barely slept for 4 years, but it was worth it when I developed what would eventually become my signature technique: a minimally invasive cardiac procedure that reduced surgery time by 40% and cut recovery time in half. By 30, I wasn't just a heart surgeon anymore. I was the heart surgeon that other doctors called when they had impossible cases. That's when I realized the real money wasn't just in saving lives, but in creating the technology that would help other surgeons save even more lives. I founded Heart Tech Solutions in my tiny apartment with $50,000 of savings and a revolutionary idea: robotic surgical assistants powered by artificial intelligence that could predict cardiac complications before they happened. The first prototype looked like something out of a science fiction movie: a sleek robotic arm that could work alongside surgeons, providing real-time analysis of heart rhythm and blood flow. Getting investors wasn't easy. "Impressive technology," they'd say, "but do you have any business experience?" What they really meant was, "You're a young woman with no MBA, and that makes us nervous." For 2 years, I heard no more often than I heard yes. Emma was struggling too during this time, bouncing between marketing jobs in New York and Los Angeles, never quite finding her footing. Every few months, she'd show up at my apartment with designer luggage and red eyes, talking about how competitive and unfair her industry was. I'd let her crash on my couch for weeks at a time, listening to her complain about backstabbing colleagues and impossible clients, while I worked 16-hour days trying to build something that could change medicine forever. Looking back, I should have noticed how she studied my work habits, my contacts, my business plans, but I thought she was just being interested in my life. The breakthrough came when Heart Tech's prototype successfully identified and prevented 3 potential cardiac arrests during a trial at Massachusetts General Hospital. Suddenly, every medical technology investor in the country wanted a meeting. Within 18 months, Heart Tech went from 3 employees working out of my apartment to over 200 staff in a gleaming facility in Cambridge. When Johnson & Johnson offered to buy Heart Tech for $1.2 billion, I stared at that number for a full 5 minutes before it felt real. The poor girl who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for college was about to become one of the wealthiest women in America. That's when I met Marcus Thompson. He approached me after my presentation at the Medical Innovation Conference in Chicago, asking thoughtful questions about HeartTech's artificial intelligence algorithms and the potential for scaling the technology globally. Marcus was everything I'd never had time to notice in a man: tall, sophisticated, with the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd never doubted himself for a single day in his life. "I specialize in medical technology investments," he said over dinner at an impossibly expensive restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. "But more than that, I'm fascinated by brilliant minds that can see solutions where everyone else sees problems." He pursued me relentlessly after that. Flowers delivered to my office every Friday, accidental meetings at medical conferences, where he'd mysteriously appear with tickets to the best restaurants in whatever city we happened to be in. When he finally kissed me outside a research symposium in San Francisco, I felt something I'd denied myself throughout years of medical training: the possibility of having both career success and personal happiness. Our relationship moved fast. Within 8 months, we were married in an elegant ceremony at Martha's Vineyard. Emma flew in from Los Angeles to be my maid of honor, tears streaming down her face as she helped me into my dress. "You deserve all the happiness in the world," she said, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I've never seen you this glowing before." I believed her. In that moment, looking at my sister's genuine smile and Marcus's adoring expression, I thought I'd finally figured out how to have everything. Marcus integrated himself into my life completely. He offered business advice, connected me with influential people in healthcare venture capital, and even suggested I make him Chief Operating Officer of HeartTech once we returned from our honeymoon. That request made me pause. It was the first time I saw a flash of something cold in his eyes when I politely declined. "Of course," he said quickly, that charming smile snapping back into place. "You built this company. I just want to support your success in whatever way I can." I appreciated what I thought was his respect for my independence. I had no idea it was a tactical retreat. Then came the offer that changed everything. Johnson & Johnson didn't just want to buy HeartTech. They wanted to integrate our AI technology into every cardiac surgery suite in North America. The number they presented made my board members' eyes widen. $1.2 billion, with retention bonuses for key staff, and guarantees that our technology would be used to save lives rather than just generate profits. After weeks of negotiations, I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning in October. That evening, Marcus organized a celebration party at our penthouse in Manhattan. As we toasted with champagne that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, I caught something that made my stomach twist slightly: a look between Marcus and Emma, who had flown in to support her big sister on this incredible day. It was brief, just a moment of eye contact that felt too intimate for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. But I was too overwhelmed by suddenly having more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes to pay much attention. If only I had. 18 months into marriage and 6 months after the acquisition, I started noticing changes in Marcus. The man who once texted me good morning from business trips now went days without contact. His attentive morning conversations became distracted, scrolling through his phone. When I'd try to discuss our future, maybe buying a house outside the city or starting a family, he'd change the subject to investment strategies and asset diversification. Then Emma showed up at our door with 3 suitcases and puffy red eyes. "The marketing world is so unstable right now," she explained, collapsing onto our leather couch. "My agency downsized, and honestly, I need some time to figure out my next move. Would it be okay if I stayed here for a few weeks?" Those few weeks turned into months, and while having Emma around initially felt like reconnecting with family, I began noticing things that made me uncomfortable. The way she and Marcus would stop talking when I entered a room. How they'd share inside jokes that I wasn't part of. The way Marcus's hand would linger on Emma's shoulder when he passed her chair at dinner. One evening, I came home early from a medical conference to find them huddled over Marcus's laptop in his study. They jumped apart like teenagers caught cheating on a test. "Just showing Emma some investment opportunities," Marcus explained smoothly, "for when she decides what direction to take her career." That night, I did something I'd never done before. I checked our network activity logs, a security measure I'd installed when we first moved into the penthouse. Marcus's computer had accessed our joint financial accounts multiple times, specifically researching wire transfer limits and international banking regulations. When I confronted him the next morning, his face remained perfectly calm. Just routine planning, Sophia. With wealth like ours, we need to be strategic about asset allocation. He smiled and added, "You know finance bores you. Trust me to handle this part." He was right that investment strategies weren't my expertise, but something in his dismissive tone triggered every alarm bell in my head. For the first time since our wedding, I wondered if I truly knew the man I'd married. That afternoon, I called Sarah Chen, a private investigator who'd done security work for Heart Tech. Within 24 hours, I had my answer, and it was worse than I'd imagined. "Mrs. Thompson," Sarah said carefully over the phone, "I found some concerning information about your husband's financial history. Before meeting you, he was nearly bankrupt due to failed investments and gambling debts. Multiple high-interest loans were suddenly paid off shortly after your marriage." My hands were shaking as I took notes. "And my stepsister? Emma has significant credit card debt across multiple accounts, but she's also been making large cash deposits into an offshore account over the past 4 months. The total is about $150,000. The source of these funds isn't clear." After hanging up, I sat in my home office trying to process this information. Everything I thought I knew about the two people closest to me had been a lie. But I needed concrete proof before I could act. Under the guise of upgrading our home security system, I had sophisticated surveillance equipment installed throughout the penthouse. I told our housekeeper and chef they could take a paid week off. Marcus and I wanted privacy for our anniversary. For the first 2 days, the cameras captured nothing unusual. On the third day, I had a scheduled meeting with Johnson & Johnson executives. Instead of staying all day, I left after 2 hours and monitored the security feed from my car parked down the street. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Marcus and Emma were in his study, but not in a romantic embrace as I'd partly expected. They were reviewing documents that looked like financial statements and legal papers. "Once it's done, how long before we can access everything?" Emma asked, leaning over Marcus's shoulder. Marcus pointed to something on the paper. "The will transfers control to family first. Since you're her stepsister and we don't have children, you inherit the personal fortune. With both documents, we'll have full legal access within 48 hours. Emma smiled in a way I'd never seen before, cold and calculating. "And they'll never find her body in the Atlantic. Perfect accident." "The yacht trip next weekend is our only shot," Marcus replied. "We won't get another opportunity like this." I nearly dropped my phone. They were planning to murder me. My husband and stepsister were conspiring to kill me for money. The betrayal was so enormous I could barely comprehend it. I drove around Manhattan for hours, my mind racing between disbelief and rage. My first instinct was to confront them immediately, to demand answers about how they could plot something so evil against someone who loved them. But a deeper survival instinct stopped me. If I confronted them now, they might accelerate their timeline or find another method. I had 6 days to prepare for what was supposed to be my last trip. That evening, I returned home and pretended everything was normal. I smiled through dinner as Marcus discussed his surprise family bonding weekend on his friend's yacht. "I thought we could use some time away from the city," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "Just the 3 of us sailing from Cape Cod up toward Nova Scotia. Pure relaxation." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "Will it be just us on the boat?" "Actually," Emma chimed in, "Marcus invited me along too. I hope that's okay. I've always wanted to see the Atlantic from a yacht." I met her eyes, searching for any trace of the stepsister who'd once held my hand on the first day she moved in with us. All I saw was a stranger wearing Emma's face. "Of course," I said. "It'll be fun, the 3 of us." That night, I lay awake next to Marcus, listening to his steady breathing and wondering how someone could sleep so peacefully after planning murder. Over the next 6 days, I made careful preparations that I prayed would keep me alive. I contacted my lawyer, David Park, and gave him a sealed envelope with instructions to open it if he didn't hear from me for 3 consecutive days. I created an emergency email account that would send automated messages to specific people if I didn't log in within 48 hours. Most importantly, I transferred $5 million to a hidden account in the Cayman Islands, separate from any assets Marcus knew about. I also went shopping for survival gear, telling the sales clerk I was planning a solo sailing adventure. I bought a waterproof GPS beacon, an emergency satellite phone, and a thin wetsuit that I could wear under my regular clothes without detection. The Ocean's Dream was everything a luxury yacht should be. 90 feet of gleaming white perfection with 5 staterooms, a hot tub on the upper deck, and a crew of 4 to handle navigation and meals. Under different circumstances, I would have been amazed by its elegance. Instead, as we boarded in Cape Cod Harbor, I felt like I was walking onto the stage for my own execution. The first 2 days passed in surreal normalcy. We sunbathed on the deck, swam in the surprisingly warm September water, and dined on incredible meals prepared by the yacht's chef. The crew was always present, which I knew kept Marcus and Emma from acting on their plan. By day 3, we were over 150 miles from shore. That evening, Emma suggested something that made my blood run cold. "You know what?" she said, lounging in a deck chair with a glass of wine. "I feel bad that the crew has to serve us dinner every night. Why don't we give them the evening off? We're all adults. We can manage one meal ourselves." Marcus immediately agreed. "Brilliant idea. Captain Rodriguez, please tell your crew they're free for the evening. We'll handle everything ourselves." As the crew retreated to their quarters below deck, I knew this was it. I excused myself to change clothes, but instead of putting on a dinner dress, I slipped into the wetsuit under my regular outfit and secured the GPS beacon and satellite phone in a waterproof pouch around my waist. When I returned to the main deck, Marcus was preparing cocktails at the bar. "Try this, babe," he said, handing me a bright orange drink with a pineapple garnish. "I made it extra strong, just how you like it." I pretended to sip while actually letting the liquid spill down the side of the glass when he wasn't looking. "Delicious," I murmured, then set it on a table. Over the next hour, I feigned increasing drowsiness, slurring my words and becoming unsteady on my feet. It wasn't hard to act. The terror of what was coming made my legs shake genuinely. "I think I need to lie down," I said, intentionally stumbling as I stood. Marcus was immediately at my side, his arm around my waist. "Let me help you to the cabin, sweetheart." His concern would have seemed loving to anyone watching, but I could feel the eagerness in his grip, the anticipation poorly disguised as care. In our stateroom, I collapsed onto the bed, keeping my eyes half closed, but maintaining just enough vision to see. Marcus checked my responsiveness, waving his hand in front of my face and calling my name. Satisfied that whatever drug he'd put in my drink had worked, he left the cabin, locking the door behind him. I waited 15 minutes before silently moving to the door, pressing my ear against it to listen. Through the yacht's ventilation system, I could hear Marcus and Emma talking on the deck above. "Is she out?" Emma asked. "Completely," Marcus replied. "I used enough sedative to knock out someone twice her size. She won't wake up even when we move her." "Good." The crew is below deck watching some soccer game. We have at least an hour. Instead of waiting to be carried to my death, I made a decision that probably saved my life. I was going to confront them directly. I slipped out of the cabin and made my way silently to the main deck, where Marcus and Emma were reviewing what looked like insurance documents. "Looking for something?" I asked, stepping into the light. The shock on their faces would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Marcus recovered first, his expression shifting from surprise to fake concern with practiced ease. "Sophia, you're awake. How are you feeling? You seemed really dizzy earlier." Emma stood frozen, her eyes darting between Marcus and me like a cornered animal. "Drop the act," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I heard everything. I know about your plan to drug me and throw me overboard. I know about the will, the money, all of it." For a moment, there was complete silence except for the sound of waves against the yacht's hull. Then Emma's face transformed. The mask of sisterly affection fell away completely, replaced by pure hatred. "You were always the smart one, weren't you?" she said, her voice dripping with resentment. "Always perfect Sophia with her brilliant mind and her billion-dollar company. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Poor Emma, not as smart as her stepsister, always needing help, always the charity case." "How long?" I asked, looking between them. "How long have you been planning this?" Marcus shrugged, no longer bothering to hide his true nature. "Since before our wedding, actually. I needed access to your assets, and marriage was the most efficient path." "And you?" I turned to Emma, the betrayal from my own family cutting deeper than anything Marcus could do to me. She laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. Do you really think I cared about being your maid of honor? Marcus approached me months before he even met you. He'd researched successful women in tech, identified you as a target, and needed someone who could inherit your money if something happened to you. I said yes immediately. You've been planning my murder for 2 years. Oh, Sophia. Emma's voice turned mock sympathetic. We deserve some of what you have. We share the same family after all. So you decided to end that family for money. Enough talking, Marcus said, advancing toward me. This changes nothing except the method. I backed toward the stairs leading to the lower deck, hoping to reach the crew quarters, but Emma moved quickly to block my path. Marcus lunged at me, and I dodged, sending him crashing into a deck chair. I managed to slip past Emma and ran toward the other side of the yacht, screaming for help. But the ocean wind carried my voice away. The crew quarters were too far, and the yacht's engines were too loud for anyone below to hear me. Marcus tackled me from behind, his weight knocking the breath from my lungs. Hold her arms, he grunted to Emma, who grabbed my wrists. I fought with the desperation of someone facing death, landing a solid kick to Marcus's stomach that made him double over. I broke free from Emma's grip and scrambled toward the railing, thinking I could jump voluntarily and swim to safety rather than be thrown unconscious. But Marcus recovered too quickly. He seized my hair, yanking me backward with such force that bright stars exploded across my vision. Together, he and Emma dragged me toward the edge of the yacht. I clawed at them, drawing blood from Marcus's cheek, fighting with strength I didn't know I possessed. For a moment, as I stared into Emma's eyes, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation, a ghost of the stepsister who'd once helped me study for my medical school entrance exams. Emma, please, I gasped. We're family, her expression hardened. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. Say goodbye forever, sis, she whispered. Then she struck me hard across the face, a slap so violent it made my ears ring, before shoving me with both hands. Marcus added his strength to hers, and I felt myself falling through space, their faces receding above me against the star-filled sky. The impact with the water was like hitting concrete. The shock of the 45-degree Atlantic drove every bit of air from my lungs and nearly caused me to inhale water immediately. Above me, I could see the yacht's lights moving away as Marcus and Emma made their escape, leaving me to die in the vast emptiness of the ocean. The cold hit me like a physical blow, but my medical training kicked in. Hypothermia would kill me faster than exhaustion if I panicked. I forced myself to think through the adrenaline and terror, focusing on the basic physics of survival. First, I needed to reach the surface and establish sustainable buoyancy. My college swimming background became crucial here. I'd been captain of Harvard's swim team, and my endurance training had prepared me for long-distance challenges, just not quite like this. I kicked hard, my lungs burning, until I broke through into the night air with a desperate gasp. The yacht was already several hundred yards away, its lights fading into the darkness. For a moment, I considered screaming, but reality set in quickly. No one would hear me over the engines, and the only people who knew I was out here wanted me dead. I activated the GPS beacon immediately, watching its tiny light blink as it sent my location to emergency services. Whether anyone would respond to a signal this far from shore was another question entirely, but it was my only chance. Treading water in the open Atlantic at night, I tried to orient myself. The moon was bright enough to distinguish the horizon, but all I could see was endless black water stretching in every direction. No land, no other vessels, nothing but waves and stars. The statistics ran through my head automatically: survival time in water this cold, likelihood of rescue, dehydration rates if I somehow made it through the night. None of them offered much hope, but I had advantages Marcus and Emma didn't know about: superior swimming ability, emergency equipment, and most importantly, the absolute determination to survive long enough to see justice done. I switched to a relaxed backstroke, focusing on keeping my face above water while expending minimal energy. The key was staying calm, regulating my breathing, and fighting off the panic that wanted to overwhelm my rational mind. Hours passed. My teeth chattered uncontrollably despite my efforts to keep moving, and my limbs grew increasingly numb. I thought about the survival training I'd taken during medical school, a wilderness medicine course that had emphasized mental fortitude above all else. Your mind will give up before your body, the instructor had said. Tell yourself you can last another minute, then another, then another. Break survival down into manageable increments. So that's what I did. One more minute, one more breath, one more look at the stars that seemed impossibly bright out here, away from any city lights. The night felt eternal, but eventually, the black sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly in the east. Dawn brought new challenges. Sun exposure and dehydration would become serious problems if I somehow survived until afternoon. But it also brought hope, because search and rescue operations would be more effective in daylight. I had been in the water for nearly 18 hours when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world: helicopter rotors cutting through the morning air. The Coast Guard helicopter appeared as a speck on the horizon, growing larger as it approached my GPS beacon signal. I waved with what little strength I had left, watching as the aircraft circled my position before dropping a rescue swimmer into the water. "Ma'am, I'm Petty Officer Williams," the swimmer said as he reached me, his voice calm and professional despite the circumstances. "We're going to get you out of here. Can you tell me your name?" "Sophia Mitchell," I managed through chattering teeth. Fell from Yacht. As they lifted me into the helicopter, one of the crew members asked the question I'd been dreading. "Ma'am, how did you end up 200 miles offshore? We haven't had any distress calls about missing persons." I closed my eyes, too exhausted to explain that the people who should have reported me missing were the ones who'd tried to kill me. At Boston Medical Center, I was treated for severe hypothermia, dehydration, and saltwater poisoning. The medical staff was amazed I'd survived so long in water that cold. What amazed me was that while I was fighting for my life in the Atlantic, Marcus and Emma were back in Manhattan, playing their roles as grieving widower and devastated stepsister. I watched the news coverage from my hospital bed. Using a fake name to avoid detection, Marcus gave a heartbreaking interview about the tragic accident that had claimed his beloved wife's life. "We woke up and she was just gone," he said, his voice breaking perfectly. "Sophia had been having trouble sleeping lately. The doctor thinks she might have been sleepwalking and fallen overboard during the night." Emma stood beside him, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of sisterly grief. "Sophia was everything to me," she told the reporters. "I don't know how to go on without my big sister." Their performance was flawless. If I hadn't felt Emma's hands shoving me into the ocean, if I hadn't heard them planning my murder, I might have believed their grief myself. Within a week of my death, they announced that according to my will and business succession documents, Emma would inherit my personal fortune, and Marcus would maintain control of my remaining business interests through our marriage. The speed with which they moved confirmed what I'd overheard on the yacht. They had prepared these legal maneuvers well in advance. Watching them claim my life's work, I felt a cold fury unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice, about ensuring they faced consequences for what they'd done, and about protecting whatever other wealthy women Marcus might target in the future. From my hospital bed, using encrypted communications, I contacted my core team. David Park, my corporate lawyer who had never trusted Marcus; Sarah Chen, the private investigator who'd uncovered Marcus's financial troubles; and Rita Lopez, a cybersecurity expert who'd worked with Heart Tech on data protection. My plan was simple but comprehensive. I needed 3 types of evidence: proof of their plot before the yacht trip, documentation of the financial fraud they were currently committing, and if possible, direct evidence of the murder attempt itself. Over the next 6 weeks, while Marcus and Emma believed I was dead, my team executed a methodical investigation. David reviewed all legal documents they'd filed since my death, identifying numerous irregularities and forged signatures. Sarah dug deeper into Marcus's past, uncovering a disturbing pattern. "I found 2 previous girlfriends who died under suspicious circumstances," she reported during one of our encrypted video calls. "Both wealthy, both in accidents where Marcus was the last person to see them alive. Neither case had enough evidence for charges, but the pattern is clear." "He's a serial killer," I said, the words feeling surreal coming from my mouth. "A specific type," Sarah corrected. "He targets wealthy women for their assets, and Emma is his perfect accomplice this time, because your will required family connection for inheritance." Rita's contribution was perhaps the most damning. She recovered deleted emails and text messages between Marcus and Emma going back over 2 years, well before my marriage. One exchange from 14 months ago made me physically sick. Marcus: "The engagement is set." She said yes. Emma: "Of course she did. My sister always wanted what she could never have, a real relationship." Marcus: "Your sister is my ticket to financial freedom, and your ticket out of debt." Emma: "How long do we have to wait?" Marcus: "Until after the company sells. Maximum value, then a tragic accident." Emma: "I can be patient for 1.2 billion reasons." Reading their casual discussion of my murder was devastating, but it also gave me the evidence I needed. Every kiss, every "I love you," every moment of what I thought was building a life together had been a calculated step toward my death. Meanwhile, David coordinated the most delicate part of our plan, preparing the penthouse for my return. Using contractors who believed they were installing a surprise renovation for the homeowners, he arranged for sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout the apartment and a security system I could control remotely. 2 months after being pushed into the Atlantic Ocean, I was ready to confront my would-be killers. I flew back to New York using false identification Rita had procured, my appearance sufficiently altered by short dark hair and different makeup that no one connected me to the presumed dead Sophia Mitchell Thompson. The night of their return from what the society pages called a healing trip to the Caribbean, which was actually a spending spree funded by my money, I entered my own penthouse through a service entrance only I knew about. Walking through those familiar rooms felt surreal. Emma had redecorated extensively, replacing my carefully chosen artwork with flashy pieces that matched her less refined taste. In the master bedroom, I found evidence that they were no longer bothering to hide their relationship. Emma's clothes hanging in my closet, her makeup scattered across my vanity. I set up an elegant table for 3 in the dining room, complete with fine china, crystal glasses filled with expensive wine, and a beautifully wrapped gift box in the center. Then I waited, watching the building's security feed on my tablet as their car approached. Marcus and Emma arrived just after midnight, clearly intoxicated and arguing about something as they entered the building. They stopped short in the lobby when they noticed lights throughout the penthouse that they definitely hadn't left on. "Did you leave the dining room lights on?" Emma asked, her speech slightly slurred. Marcus frowned, suddenly alert despite the alcohol. "No, stay behind me." He moved cautiously through the apartment, checking rooms while Emma followed despite his instruction. Their confusion grew when they heard soft jazz music, one of Marcus's favorite albums that I'd started playing remotely. "Someone's here," he hissed, pulling Emma behind him in a show of protection that might have seemed gallant if I didn't know his true nature. They made their way to the dining room, stopping in the doorway when they saw the elaborate table setting. 3 places, fine china, crystal glasses, and that mysterious gift box in the center. "What the hell is this?" Emma whispered, clutching Marcus's arm. That was my cue. I stepped out from the shadows of the adjacent room, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to our last dinner together before the yacht trip. "Welcome home," I said calmly. "I've been waiting for you." The color drained from both their faces instantly. Marcus stumbled backward, nearly knocking Emma over. For several seconds, neither could speak, their eyes wide with shock and terror. "This isn't possible," Marcus finally managed. "You're dead. We saw you drown." "You saw me fall," I corrected. "You assumed I drowned." "Rather large miscalculation on your part." Emma let out a strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. "You're not real? This isn't happening." I stepped forward into the full light of the chandelier. "I assure you, Emma, I'm very real. And unlike you, I'm not here to kill anyone. I'm here to deliver a gift." Marcus seemed to recover some composure, his mind visibly working through options. "Sophia, thank God you're alive. We thought we'd lost you. There was a terrible accident." "Stop," I cut him off. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence. I heard you planning my murder." I felt Emma's hands push me off that yacht. "I know everything." "You can't prove anything," Emma said, her shock giving way to defiance. "It's your word against ours. Everyone already thinks you died in an accident." I smiled, a cold expression that made both of them tense. "That brings me to my gift." I gestured toward the box on the table. "Open it." Marcus approached cautiously, as if the box might explode. In some ways, it contained something even more destructive than a bomb. He lifted the lid and stared at the contents, his face contorting with dawning horror. Inside was a custom presentation containing 4 items. First, a waterproof camera, the same one I'd hidden in our yacht cabin, which had captured their conversation about drugging me and staging my accident. Second, a flash drive containing all the recovered emails and text messages between them, dating back to before my marriage, and explicitly discussing their plan to kill me for my money. Third, financial records showing their embezzlement and fraud since my death, along with documentation of secret accounts they'd established to hide stolen assets. Fourth, and perhaps most satisfying, police warrants for their arrest on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and a host of other crimes. Already signed by a judge, thanks to David's legal maneuvering. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered, rifling through the documents with trembling hands. "Actually, it was quite possible with the right team," I replied. "A team of people who, unlike you two, understand the meaning of loyalty." Emma suddenly lunged for the box, trying to grab the evidence, but I was ready. With the press of a button on my phone, the dining room doors locked automatically. "The police are already outside," I informed them calmly, "along with FBI agents. Since some of your financial crimes cross state lines, retry NT continue edit." They were waiting for my signal, which I just sent. Marcus's face transformed completely. The mask of civilized behavior dropped entirely, revealing the predator beneath. He flipped the heavy dining table toward me with surprising strength, sending dishes crashing to the floor, and charged toward a side door. It was locked, of course. All exits were secured except the main entrance, where law enforcement waited. Realizing he was trapped, Marcus turned on me with murderous rage, grabbing a steak knife from the scattered cutlery on the floor. "You think you're so clever," he snarled, advancing toward me with the blade raised. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me, for real this time." But I had planned for every contingency. As he lunged, the hidden door behind me opened, revealing David and 2 private security specialists, who had been waiting just out of sight. They tackled Marcus with professional efficiency, disarming him before he could reach me. Emma, seeing her accomplice subdued, broke down completely. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing and rocking back and forth like a child. "It was his idea," she wailed. "He made me do it. I never wanted to hurt you, Soph." I looked down at my stepsister, the person who had shared my teenage years, who had once been my closest family member, now reduced to a pathetic, blubbering mess, trying to save herself by betraying her partner in crime. "You whispered in my ear before pushing me off that yacht," I reminded her, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "You told me to say goodbye forever. Was that his idea too?" She had no answer, only more tears and desperate attempts to shift blame. The police entered then, reading both of them their rights as they were handcuffed. Marcus continued to struggle and threaten, his true nature fully exposed now that his charming facade had crumbled. Emma went limp, still crying and trying to plead her case to anyone who would listen. As they were led away, I stood in my reclaimed home, surrounded by the wreckage of our confrontation. Crystal fragments caught the light from the chandelier, scattering tiny rainbows across the walls like misplaced celebrations. The victory felt hollow in some ways. Nothing could restore what I had lost, the ability to trust the people I loved most. But amid the broken glass and scattered evidence, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The worst had happened, and I had survived it. What was there left to fear? FBI agent Richardson approached me, her face professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying something like respect. "Ms. Mitchell, we'll need your formal statement, but it can wait until tomorrow if you prefer. You've been through quite an ordeal." I nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was fading. Tomorrow would be soon enough to begin the legal proceedings that would ensure Marcus and Emma faced full consequences for their crimes. The media explosion that followed was everything we had anticipated. My resurrection from the dead, combined with the arrest of my husband and stepsister on attempted murder charges, created a perfect storm of public interest. David had prepared a simple statement confirming I was alive, that criminal proceedings were underway, and requesting privacy during this difficult time. Privacy, of course, was the one thing money couldn't buy in this situation. Every news outlet, talk show, and true crime podcast wanted an exclusive. Social media exploded with hashtags like "Our Back from the Dead" and "Billion-Dollar Betrayal." Old photos of Marcus, Emma, and me at charity galas were dissected for signs people claimed to have missed. I gave one carefully managed interview to a respected journalist known for her integrity, partly to control the narrative, and partly because I needed to say my piece before retreating from the spotlight to heal. "They underestimated you completely," the journalist observed during our conversation. "What do you think was their biggest mistake?" I considered this, thinking back to those dark hours in the Atlantic Ocean. "They saw only what they wanted from me, money and status. They never saw the whole person, with skills and determination they never bothered to learn about. In the end, they were defeated by the parts of me they ignored." The preliminary hearing was a media circus, but I attended wearing a simple navy suit, my posture straight and my expression composed. When Marcus and Emma were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits, I looked at them directly, refusing to flinch or show weakness. Marcus glared back with undisguised hatred. Emma couldn't meet my eyes, her shoulders shaking with what might have been shame or fear. It was impossible to tell which. The evidence was overwhelming. The Yacht recording alone was devastating, capturing their explicit discussion of murdering me for my inheritance. Their electronic communications provided a paper trail of premeditation going back years. The financial records showed clear fraud both before and after my presumed death. Both were denied bail, classified as flight risks, with access to stolen funds and international connections. As they were led away, Emma finally looked at me, her expression a complex mixture of regret, anger, and something that might have been the ghost of sisterly love. I gave her nothing in return, no hatred, but no forgiveness either. Just the steady gaze of someone who had moved beyond her power to hurt. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about how it felt to face my would-be killers. "Justice isn't the same as healing," I said, pausing before getting into the waiting car. Today was about justice. Healing is my private journey. The months that followed were filled with legal proceedings as Marcus and Emma turned on each other, each trying to minimize their own culpability by implicating the other more deeply. The prosecution had little trouble building an airtight case with our evidence and their mutual betrayal. During this period, I began the difficult process of rebuilding my life. I moved out of the penthouse. Too many memories, too much betrayal soaked into those walls to ever feel safe there again. Instead, I purchased a modern, secure apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. Its open layout and walls of glass, a deliberate contrast to the secrets and deception of the past year. I also faced the surreal challenge of legally returning from the dead. The paperwork was staggering, undoing death certificates, reclaiming frozen accounts, re-establishing legal identity. David handled most of it, but some things required my personal attention. The irony, he remarked during one marathon document signing session, is that Marcus and Emma actually made some of this easier by moving so quickly to claim your assets. Their fraud means many transfers were never fully completed. 9 months after that night of confrontation, the trials concluded. Marcus, with his history of suspicious deaths and role as the mastermind, received 30 years without possibility of parole for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Emma received 18 years, a lighter sentence reflecting her secondary role and eventual cooperation with prosecutors. I attended both sentencings, not out of vindictiveness, but to close that chapter definitively. As the bailiff led Emma away after her sentencing, she turned toward me one final time. "Sophia," she called out, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, not for getting caught, but for everything. I know you'll never forgive me. I wouldn't either." I didn't respond. Some wounds went too deep for words to bridge, some betrayals too fundamental for any apology to address. The door closed behind her, and with it, I closed the door on that part of my life forever. Later that evening, alone in my apartment, I stood at the windows watching ships navigate Boston Harbor. Each vessel moved through the darkness, guided by its own lights, plotting its own course through potentially treacherous waters, not so different from people, really. My phone chimed with a message from an unexpected source, Captain Rodriguez, the yacht captain from the Ocean's Dream. We had stayed in touch after he testified in the trials, and I had quietly funded his daughter's medical school education in gratitude for his honest testimony. Saw the news about the sentencing, his message read. The ocean didn't take you because you have more work to do in this world. Remember that. Looking out at the harbor, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not from grief or anger, but from release. I had survived the unsurvivable twice, the cold depths of the Atlantic and the colder depths of human betrayal. Whatever came next would be entirely on my terms. 1 year after the sentencing, I stood on the deck of a small sailing vessel. Not a massive yacht this time, but a modest boat I had chartered for a personal pilgrimage. The Atlantic stretched before me, the same waters that had nearly claimed my life now sparkling peacefully in the morning sun. "Are you sure about this?" David asked, standing beside me at the railing. He had become more than just my lawyer through this ordeal, one of the few people whose loyalty had never wavered. "I need to face it," I replied, checking the GPS coordinates that marked the approximate location where I had been thrown overboard. Not to relive the trauma, but to reclaim this space, to prove to myself that I'm the one in control now. The legal proceedings had dominated headlines for months, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal that captivated public imagination. Investigation into Marcus's past had revealed even more disturbing patterns, with authorities reopening cases involving his previous girlfriends whose accidental deaths now appeared highly suspicious. Emma's cooperation had helped prosecutors build cases that would likely add decades to Marcus's sentence. Her tearful testimony about being manipulated and controlled rang hollow against the evidence of her active, enthusiastic participation in planning my murder. I had watched the extended legal process unfold with a strange detachment, as if observing characters in a drama rather than people who had once been central to my life. That psychological distance was necessary for my survival, a protective barrier between my present healing and the painful past. My recovery hadn't been linear. There were days of progress followed by nights of paralyzing nightmares. Moments of strength interrupted by unexpected panic attacks, when a boat's engine sounded too similar to the ocean's dream, or when someone approached me from behind unexpectedly. 3 months after the trials ended, on David's recommendation, I began working with Dr. Maria Santos, a therapist specializing in trauma and betrayal. Our sessions were challenging, forcing me to confront not just the physical trauma of nearly drowning, but the deeper wounds of trust violated by those closest to me. The hardest betrayals to heal from are those perpetrated by people who were supposed to love us, Dr. Santos observed during one particularly difficult session. Your experience was extreme, but the fundamental wound, broken trust, is something many people understand. That insight led to my first concrete step toward meaningful recovery, founding the Phoenix Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping victims of financial crimes and domestic betrayal. The foundation provided legal support, therapy resources, and emergency funds for people trying to escape dangerous relationships, particularly those complicated by financial control and manipulation. "Why Phoenix?" a reporter asked at the foundation's launch event. "Because rising from ashes isn't just a myth," I explained. "It's a process, painful but necessary, and no one should have to do it alone." The foundation became my passion, a way to transform my suffering into something constructive. I assembled a board of experts in relevant fields, created partnerships with existing support organizations, and funded research into the warning signs of dangerous relationships disguised as love. My approach to business also transformed. I returned to the medical technology world, not as a CEO building the next billion-dollar company, but as an angel investor focused on startups led by women and minorities who had traditionally struggled to secure funding. My traumatic experience had sensitized me to power imbalances and the importance of creating more equitable systems. Personal relationships proved more challenging to rebuild. The double betrayal had left my ability to trust fundamentally damaged. I maintained a small circle of proven loyal friends, David, Sarah, Rita, and Dr. Santos, who had stood by me through the darkest times. Beyond them, I kept most people at a comfortable distance, unwilling to risk that level of vulnerability again. 6 months after the sentencing, I made one of the most difficult decisions of my recovery journey. I requested a prison meeting with Emma. David thought it was a mistake. Dr. Santos supported it as a potential step toward closure, provided I had realistic expectations about what I might achieve. The meeting took place in a sterile visitation room at the Women's Correctional Facility in Massachusetts. Emma looked smaller somehow, the prison uniform hanging loosely on her frame. Her once perfectly maintained appearance was now plain and institutional. When I entered, her eyes widened with surprise. She had requested meetings several times, but this was the first I had accepted. "Sophia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her, maintaining eye contact but saying nothing. Let her fill the silence. "I've had a lot of time to think," she continued nervously, "about who I am, about what I did. The therapist here says I should take full responsibility without excuses, so that's what I'm trying to do." She took a shaky breath. "I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and no apology can ever be adequate. But I am sorry, truly, deeply sorry." "Why?" I asked. The single word contained all my questions. Why me? Why murder? Why betray family? Emma's composure cracked. "I was jealous of you my entire life. You were always the smart one, the capable one. Even when I got more attention for my looks or social skills, I knew it was superficial. You were building something real, something lasting." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "When Marcus approached me with his plan, it felt like finally having power over you. It's disgusting, I know. I disgust myself." "Marcus approached you first?" This contradicted her court testimony, where she had claimed he manipulated her after they began an affair. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Before he ever met you, he had researched successful women in tech and identified you as a target. He needed someone close to you, someone who could inherit if something happened to you. He offered me a percentage." She looked up, her expression haunted. I said yes immediately. That's the kind of person I was. The past tense was interesting, suggesting she saw her former self as fundamentally different. Whether that represented genuine change or sophisticated manipulation, I couldn't tell. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the conversation. She shook her head. "Not nearly drowning. Not even the betrayal itself. It was realizing that in all our years as stepsisters, all the times I helped you financially, all the family holidays and shared experiences, you never actually saw me as a human being. I was just a resource to be exploited." Tears streamed down her face. "I know, and I can't change that or fix it. I'll be 54 years old when I get out of here. All I can do is try to become someone different than the person who did those terrible things." I stood to leave, having heard what I came for. Not forgiveness. That would take much longer if it ever came at all. Not closure exactly, but confirmation of what I had already sensed. The betrayal had never really been about me. It reflected the broken moral compasses of Marcus and Emma, their internal emptiness that no amount of money could ever fill. At the door, I turned back. "I don't hate you, Emma. That would require emotional investment I'm no longer willing to make. I wish you well in becoming whoever you're trying to become. But we'll never be family again." Her sob followed me out of the room, but it didn't follow me out of the prison. For the first time since that night on the yacht, I felt truly free of the emotional weight of her betrayal. Now, standing on this boat at the site of my near death, I completed another circle of healing. I had brought white roses, one for each month of my recovery journey. One by one, I dropped them into the water, watching them float away on the current. "This isn't about forgiveness," I said to David and the small group of friends who had accompanied me on this pilgrimage. "It's about reclaiming this space, this experience, about acknowledging that I survived not just through luck, but through my own strength and the help of good people." The final rose I held for a moment longer. "This one is for the person I was before, the trusting woman who died in these waters. I honor her memory, but I don't mourn her anymore. She evolved into someone stronger." As the last rose joined the others on the waves, a profound sense of peace settled over me. Not the naive peace of someone untouched by tragedy, but the hard-won serenity of a survivor who had rebuilt from ruins. Back on land, I continued building my new life. The Phoenix Foundation expanded nationally, helping thousands of people escape dangerous situations. My investment portfolio supported dozens of promising startups, led by founders from underrepresented backgrounds. I developed new friendships cautiously but genuinely, creating a chosen family to replace the one that had betrayed me. 2 years after the confrontation, I published a memoir titled After the Fall: Rebuilding When Your Foundation Crumbles. It became a surprising source of connection with others who had experienced different but similarly devastating betrayals. The book's success led to speaking engagements, where I shared my journey not as a victim, but as someone who had faced the worst and emerged whole, if changed. The most important lesson I learned, I told an audience of survivors at a Phoenix Foundation event, is that while trust can be broken catastrophically, it can also be rebuilt deliberately, not as a default setting anymore, but as a conscious choice based on evidence and boundaries. And paradoxically, that kind of trust, earned rather than given blindly, creates stronger connections than I had before. I never remarried, though I remained open to the possibility of love again. Some wounds needed more time than others, but I refused to let Marcus and Emma steal future joy along with everything else they had tried to take. Today, 5 years after Emma whispered, "Say goodbye forever," before pushing me into the Atlantic, I understand that some people mean those words literally. They see others as obstacles to be removed, rather than human beings worthy of love and respect. But here's what they didn't count on. Sometimes the people they try to destroy are stronger than they appear. Sometimes we survive their worst intentions and come back not for revenge, but for justice. Sometimes we build something better from the wreckage they leave behind. The ocean that nearly took my life also taught me something profound about my own resilience. In those dark hours, treading water under an indifferent sky, I discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. That knowledge has stayed with me through every challenge since. If you're watching this and you've experienced betrayal, whether from family, a partner, or someone else you trusted, I want you to know that survival is possible. Healing is possible. Building a life that's even better than what you lost is possible. It won't be easy. There will be nights when the pain feels unbearable, days when you question whether you can trust anyone ever again. But you're stronger than you know, and you don't have to face this alone. Share your story in the comments if you feel comfortable doing so. Every account of survival strengthens others who are still in the darkness. And if this story helped you in any way, please like this video and subscribe for more content about overcoming life's most difficult challenges. Remember, sometimes our greatest strength is revealed only after we've been broken. The question isn't whether you'll face betrayal or loss in this life. It's how you'll choose to rebuild when you do. Thank you for listening to my story. Whatever you're facing right now, I believe in your ability to not just survive, but to create something beautiful from whatever remains.